fans? It's another episode of Donnie's Disposals. I am your host, Coach Donnie Hess here, back with another AFL review. And today, ladies and gentlemen, joining me as my co-host to review round 18 is the other half of the Americans watching the footy podcast. It is Ethan Castle. Ethan, thank you for joining me. Let's see, can the older brother outdo the younger brother in this week's episode?
Thanks a lot for having me. Really been looking forward to this for a while, and I think we got a pretty spicy round to talk about.
I would not disagree with you at all. So let's jump right into it. Great transition here. Your thoughts on round 18, kind of overall, because I agree there were some stumbling blocks and some results that I have to say shocked me a little, but definitely make these next 5 rounds going as we keep continuing towards the finals. It keeps me a lot of intrigue between number 5 from about spot 5 to about 14.
Yeah, I feel like it was a narrative heavy round where there were like a lot of main characters, a lot of talking points, even if there were only a couple of close games at the very start of the round, and then most of the others were blowouts. Like all of them gave you something to consider that you probably didn't think of before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely agree with you. So let's jump right into it. Right into it. Thursday night footy sees the Sydney Swans escape at the SCG, beating the Doggies 78-76. And as a Swans fan, I had to say, I did not see this coming. I thought the Swans could be competitive, but I really was not expecting a win here. And it somewhat gives a flickering shot to the Swans to maybe, with a little bit of help, somehow potentially make finals.
Yeah, I don't know how much this changes the odds of finals, and I still think Bulldogs have largely control their own destiny to get in and to actually probably finish fifth or sixth rather than, potentially go on the road if they're facing an out of state team in finals. But there's definitely some concerns here if I'm the Dogs moving forward. And, on one hand, it's like, all right, the Swans were due for a close win and they got it. But on the other hand, you had things like the Dogs constantly allowing Sydney's forwards to leak out back in the second half that should have been able to prevent. I did think, in terms of Sydney's forward play, it was really cool seeing Joel Amarty and Sam Wicks make themselves useful outside of the forward 50. That's definitely something that I haven't seen as much of in the past. Like Amarty racking up 8 tackles in this game, I think really says a lot.
Yeah, I completely agree. And with me, the Armani having him and McLean kind of rotate as the ruckman, which I was interesting in selection when Hickey got dropped. I was going, is this the game to drop Hickey when they're facing Tim English, who I have a hard time arguing. I have a hard time arguing with anybody that he's got a very good case to be the All-Australian ruckman this year. So to drop and to put in 2 secondary ruckmans against one of the best ruckmen in the entire competition this year. It was an interesting call. It worked out. Yeah, you lose the hitouts. I think Tim English had 60 hitouts in this game. It was absolutely ridiculous. But you got to admit, Armadi and McLean didn't do too bad a job. There were still some things that they did after that first quarter. The atrocious clearance numbers I really kind of evened out, which I think was something the Swans had always had a little bit of trouble with. So this was just a game where if you're the Doggies fans, you're kicking yourself because could these points come back to bite you because you had a chance to put yourself in that home elimination final, and now you're teetering a little bit to potentially have to go on the road potentially in that first elimination final.
Yeah, that said, I don't see too many teams, too many out of state teams, other than maybe the Crows, who I think are a long shot to, be in that fifth or sixth spot. So I think, you're probably playing at the G either way. But there was definitely a missed opportunity there. The whole Ruckman discussion, I think, is really interesting because it's like if you throw Hickey out there or say Laddams was healthy, it's like, is it worth using a position on a guy who's just going to get beaten around by Tim English? Or, would you rather just use that roster spot on someone that's more skilled elsewhere? And I think that's what they ended up going with. I can see an argument for both. But like thinking back to how bad it was when the Cats were playing John Segler, and it was just like, all right, let's just let Blitzovs and DeConing take hitouts and make things up just by being stronger elsewhere. I like it. I think it is becoming evident that Tom Hickey is on the wrong side of the aging curve and is
Mm-hmm.
probably not going to be doing this much longer. at this level.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think Rook Jesus, this might be his last year. Unfortunately, and like I said, for him to have the season that he had the first year he came in 2022, I mean, I tip my cap to him. I mean, he had a resurgence. He's just unfortunately injured. The injury bug has hurt him a little bit. I just think that some of these younger, super athletic ruckmen are just getting the best of him. Unfortunately, I mean, I think Laddams is eventually supposed to be the guy. We'll have to see how that goes because sometimes he has brain fades, which I know several Swans fans get very annoyed with him when he had a couple of
Yeah,
those last year.
I mean, it happened before he was a Swan. Think back to his time at Port.
Hmm.
But yeah, I thought the difference makers in this game, I thought this was one of Errol Golden's best games. I thought Ollie Florin played quite well. And I think, once again, Justin McInerney has just been one of the unsung heroes where it's like this team wouldn't even have a prayer to play finals if it wasn't for the season he's had.
Hmm. Yeah, it's been very interesting. The young guys, and again, no Chad Warner in this game. Again, still out with his quote with his calf strain. So be interesting to see if how selection changes over these next few rounds when Chad does become fully healthy. It'll be fascinating to see how Coach Longmire. And then I have to say this before we get over Horace Longmire, 300th game, a milestone matchup, getting a win, and the guy's trying to give him a chair off, and him basically
That was
saying,
hilarious.
I had to give it. That was absolutely fantastic. He still walked through the guard of honor. I got to give it to him, but the fact they wanted to try to chair him was absolutely. I had to chuckle at that, especially for one. So we'll jump to it. As you said, another cracking game on Friday night sees the Demons battle back in the fourth quarter to get a 105-104 win over Brisbane. And I know people are still going to go, well, Brisbane can't win at the G. They sure had an awfully good shot at doing it. They just capitulated at the worst possible time. And the D's found something in that fourth quarter that they haven't had for a few rounds. Your thoughts on this? Because I know there were several people that went to this game and with, I think it was like 8 minutes left, started to leave the G that were D's fans and could not believe the result when they saw it later.
Yeah, never leave a game early. The moment the final siren sounds, hightail it out of there, but you got to stick it out. I think this proves it. Um, Vintage Max Gone performance. Christian Petrarca is absolutely feeling himself right now. Jake Melksham played the hero. I was really surprised that playing Petrarca further forward and Kazi Pickett further back worked. That was like not an obvious adjustment. I feel like a lot of times as fans, like you call for an adjustment that's pretty obvious. This was not one that like the average person thinks of. And when I heard about it, I thought, like, really, you're going to take one of your most electrifying forwards out of his area and throw your gun midfielder in there? But it totally worked.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I know I've heard some people say that Christian Petrarca has the abilities to be almost a Dusty Martin, to start in the square, go forward, and be that one-on-one headache because he's very strong. He's great contested, great with ball in hand, is very slick with hand movement. So he's one of those that I think his kicking accuracy has been a little bit of his question mark, a little bit like Nat Fife. Like I know Fife was the same thing. It's like play him in that striker role, start him in the square, and then move him forward and let the use that big, strong body to be able to be a tough marking matchup. But it was his goal kicking accuracy that had always kind of haunted him. But he's found the center sticks these last couple of rounds. And Melksham coming in and giving them some energy. I think Ben Brown's finally kind of figured out he's going to have to do a little bit more than just be the occasional marking forward with the long run up to the occasional kick of goals. He's got to do a little bit more. And I kind of like letting a electric player with good speed, like because I pick it go center because Shea Bolton for the Richmond Tigers can do it occasionally, where it's that electric speed type of player that guy that can do anything with footy in hand type of player. Sometimes when you go into the midfield, they almost kind of find themselves even more because they show their talent with footy in hand, not just kicking goals, but now they can distribute just as well. So I kind of liked this move. The fact that it works makes me think, will Goodwin continue with it? Or how will the revamp of Clayton Oliver when he comes back? How will that change this group?
I will say, I guess, putting an electrifying guy like that in the middle. I mean, I've seen, like, for years I've called for Brad Close to be in that spot more because he's so dang fast. So I get that. You mentioned Ben Brown. I thought he played an excellent game where he was doing so much more than just being tall forward. We've seen him play on the wing last year, but he was involved in a few forward ruck contests even, and there were a couple times where he held his own against Oscar McInerney, leading to goals. That was an enormous point in that whole fourth quarter comeback.
Absolutely agree. This is a D's team. If they play like that, they're in that four. They're in that four, the four team discussion for a premiership. Legitimately. The problem is it's just not been there consistently. And I think that's the frustrating part for me is if you look at this lineup with May, Lever, and the spine of this team, this is a premiership spine for anybody's liking, but it just hasn't been themselves since after the bye last year. So this is a Melbourne team that's frustrated me. Brisbane, we'll go to Brisbane a little bit. I I honestly believe that they're still going to be an out. They're still going to be a tough team. The thing that frustrates me is that they keep showing that the vast MCG becomes a little bit of a problem for them defensively because there's so much space to guard, and they have kind of gotten into that little niche friend zone of the GABA and some of these smaller grounds. So when they go to the MCG, they kind of lose themselves a little bit. Fagan's got to do something. I don't know what, but he's got to try to figure something out because if you can't win at the G, you can't win a grand final.
Yeah, you gotta figure out how to play there. You can argue about whether that's right or wrong. It's just an inescapable fact.
Mm-hmm.
I thought on Brisbane side, Charlie Cameron's been a little bit off for the last couple weeks. I know he was banged up in this game. I thought Zach Bailey did play really well. If you can get more games like this out of him, that would be huge. And Joe Danaher, 24 disposals.
I know it's very interesting seeing a forward with that many touches, but the part that frustrates me is that he gets 24 touches, but in all his scoreboard his scoreboard 2-3. I mean, I think he's kicking himself. He could have had a bag of five in this if he would have kicked straight. So it's like he's a frustrating enigma at times because there are times he can be an electric guy that can kick goals, get people out of the stands, and then there's games where he does this type of stuff. He gets inaccurate, he rushes things, and I think he squanders some opportunities that I think he really, really shouldn't. So he's another frustrating commodity. They were without Josh Dunkley, and I think he is a linchpin in the center for them a little bit. So I do kind of put a little bit of an asterisk on this loss a little bit because you add Dunkley into this. I think it changes them a little bit when it comes to rotation. So I'm fascinated to see when Josh Dunkley comes back. Does it change some fortunes for the Lions, maybe going through the rest of the season?
I mean, you could say the same about not having Oliver. I think it kind of evens out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree with that there. So let's jump to it. Unfortunately, as you kind of said, the next few games kind of did not go, I think, the way many experts even thought this would go. So we see a run of blowouts, starting with one that I could have saw this happening. I didn't want to see it happen, but it did as Collingwood give a nice little smashing by 46 points over the Fremantle Dockers, 113-67. And I don't know what it is about this Dockers team, but they're really frustrating me because as soon as I think they've figured it out, as soon as I think they're going to be this competitive team that has a chance for finals and has a chance to do some damage, they give me this performance. I know it's against Collingwood. I know people are going to say that this is one of the best teams in the entire competition, but at times in the first half, their play just frustrated the crap out of me because there were runners everywhere.
Yeah. If for those of you that haven't listened to Americans Watching the Footy, we talk more about Frio than probably any team other than the ones that we actually follow because we think they're really interesting. Last year, we hopped on board with them before a lot of people thought like, hey, this could be a finalist on the road to a major contending window. And then after last season, despite adding Luke Jackson, they took a step back, giving up Blake Acres for basically nothing was just pointless. And you look at what they've done this season, at times they've had the identity from last year when they had that good run a couple months ago where they actually looked like themselves, playing really fast through the corridor and putting on really good pressure. And then that just vanished again. And once again, instead, they look like a team that just like, while their defenders are super valuable fantasy players because they rack up a ton of touches just passing it around in their own 50, other than maybe Luke Ryan, they don't do anything to stop anybody. I mean, who of their back six is actually going to win defensive battles?
Mm-hmm. And no Brennan Cox and Hayden Young didn't help. So they were a little bit under. They were a little bit under strength in this game too. That doesn't help. But again, I agree. It's you got a lot of great ball users back there, but great defenders. Alex Pierce has definitely taken a step back this year. I don't think he is the defender that he was last year or even a
Yeah.
few years prior, which I think has hurt them because his ability to kind of take a one-on-one matchup and neutralize it for the most part kind of then let Cox, Ryan, Hayden Young, and then Clark also have the ability to then distribute from there and use kind of their offensive abilities to drive this Fremantle team forward. But I mean, you can't help but not marvel at this Collingwood team. You look at it, and I'm already seeing it that there are announcers on the podcast. And like, they are crowning this Collingwood team champions already. And as much as I understand it, because you look at it, if I'm a Collingwood member, the one thing that would worry me is that you never want to play your best footy now. You want to play your best footy in about 6 weeks when the finals start. So I worry that maybe they're peaking too early. And I know it's weird saying this with a team that's played as well as Collingwood has this year, but I
Oh,
worry
yeah.
they're peaking too early.
I've thought about that for a while. I thought about that with Port as well. Like I think back to the Demons last year. That's a team that definitely peaked too early.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this Collingwood team, they really have their identity at this point. They're so good counterattacking. And when you don't have any way to resist that in the corridor, all of a sudden it's, a 10
Mm-hmm.
goal second quarter and the game's completely out of reach.
Yeah, there is no argument with that. When they get going, if they can get that rush going, the runners and all the speed out of from halfback, even their fullback lines got pace to the point where if they get going, they're incredibly difficult to stop, especially if they get you on turnover using all that pressure. It's a scary proposition, but I'm interested to see how it goes because I think the crowning is a little early. I just a little bit early, a little bit early for me specifically. So let's jump up Heritage Bank Stadium up on the Gold Coast. And sir, I don't know about you, but I kept an eye on this game because I was watching the Collingwood Fremantle game and it had the score at the bottom, and I could not believe what I was watching. I legitimately could not believe what I was watching. The Suns get a win, my 26, under their caretaker coach, King, 77-51. But what in Sam Hill has happened to the Saints? Because these guys look like last year, a great start to the season, and this fade into oblivion to end the year.
Well, first off, a lot of guys injured. No Jack Higgins, no Jack Billings, no Max King, no Tim Membry. There's a lengthy list, but no Seb Ross, who I think was fabulous early in the year.
Mm-hmm.
No Josh Battle. Or no, did Josh Battle play? I think he did.
Yeah, he
Sorry.
did. Yep.
Yeah, I was just looking at the injury list, realized it hasn't been updated. Josh Battle, it was funny. He had gotten concussed with Oscar Allen taking a hanger over him, and then Jack Lukosius took a hanger over him for the first goal of the game. It's like, why am I back here? But my take on the Saints, they did not lose this game on Saturday. They lost this game in the offseason by doing absolutely nothing in the trade period. Firing Brett Ratten so late and then doing nothing in trades, that's why they lost this game. You have to be able to build up depth. You have to have guys for when your stars are injured or don't perform. And they don't have that. Jack Steele has had a phenomenal year. He did not have a very good game. Jack Sinclair has had a great season. He had a really lousy game. And it's like, who's there to pick things up? Really, really not much. I mean, Marcus Windhager had his most active game of the year, and I really like him. Zach Jones was solid in his first game back. That's a welcome addition. But other than that, I mean, there really just wasn't much. I mean, Isaiah Wanganeen Miller, who I think has been a really nice piece all season. He was the leader with 28 disposals. He should be a 22 under 22 member.
Yeah,
But
he's definitely one of those youngsters that I think has played well. Is the only thing though is that if you look at them at the start of the year and how so many of their top guys were hurt, and yet they won games. And it's like, I don't know what it is that in the middle of the season, they started getting some of their veterans back. And then they kind of had this change from the everybody working together, chip on their shoulder under Ross Lyon type of team. And they've kind of reverted back to what they were last year. And I don't know how Ross can fix it because they're reverting back to old habits, and I think that's the most frustrating part about it is there are still really good players on this team. I mean, Rowan Marshall again, I think is one of those that he's still kind of getting used to being the guy. He'll have great games, but he'll have some underperforming games. I don't think he was too super bad in this one. Brad Crouch, Jack Sinclair, Bobby Hill, Zach Jones. You've got some really good players there that are, you could say, underperforming. Yes, Jones first came back, but Hill underperforming. I just it's very frustrating because you look at, yes, their injury list has some guys out, but with some of them, they haven't been there very much this year. Yet they were winning at the start of the year with Caminiti, Owens, and kind of the ragtag group of no names from the start of the season.
I mean, Owens has established himself at this point as a legit rising star contender.
Mm-hmm.
I think Caminiti's been solid. Weird that Matthias Filippo got subbed out like right after scoring a goal. I think what had happened was they had already put in the sub for like as
Mm-hmm.
soon as the next stoppage came, and then what do you know? That stoppage comes when he kicks a goal.
That's got to be frustrating, and whew,
I'm
that's
still
just a bad look.
I'm still way more optimistic about the Saints than I was at the start of this year, even if their season, falls apart. I think there's a very good chance because of their upcoming schedule that they stay in the finals hunt the entire way and might stay in the 8 all the way up until round 24, kind of like Carlton did last year. They, assuming you take care of North and Hawthorn the next couple of weeks, they could easily do that and then lose their final 4.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I thought this team was going to be a wooden spoon contender. They're still way better than I had ever thought they were going to be. And they have a young core that provides a lot of reason to be optimistic. And I like what their future is. I just think they sabotage themselves by doing absolutely nothing in the trade period.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how they go. I agree that there's some youngsters there that you can't wait to watch grow up, and I'm fascinated to see it. But they've got some veterans that I think they need to make up their mind whether they're going to keep them or move on. A Brad Hill is one of those that, do they want to continue to keep him on there? Or do they try to get him, move him out, maybe get a few assets there? But we'll have to see. It'll be fascinating to see what impact Ross Lyon does with this team. I'll keep an eye on it. I agree with you. There's some green shoots, but again, being just barely in the finals after having a great start, just like they did last year, that's got to be a little bit frustrating for some in the stands that potentially thought this was a finals caliber team, and they're trending the wrong way, unfortunately. So, well, let's move over to Marvel Stadium and a team that
Before we
is,
do that, I do
sure, go
want to
ahead.
add I want to add a bit about how the Suns played in this game because they
Mhm.
deserve some credit.
Oh, I agree.
Obviously, when you have less than a week with a coach, you're playing a simpler game plan, and they did. But first half, they were phenomenal off stoppages and ground balls. Rory Atkins kicking 2 goals out of nowhere. Sam Flanders, broadcast team was in love with him. He had
Mhm.
33 disposals. And, Jack Lukosius seems like he's either the best player on the field or he's unplayable with no in between. And this was one of those games where he's the best player. He had 4 goals. He was a monster. And while I think the Suns' defense was good, I thought Will Powell had a nice game, and obviously Atkins. I was surprised that the Saints forwards struggled so much without Max King. It's like, they started the year playing without him and they did just fine. And then it's like they forgot what life without Max King is like because they looked completely lost without him this game. But good win for Gold Coast, who aren't completely out of this somehow. I mean, realistically, it's going to take probably 50 points to make finals. Maybe 48 is enough. 50 should be. And they're sitting there at 32. If they go 4-2 the rest of the way, and percentage isn't on their side as of now, but
Mhm.
they're not completely done for.
I said this last week on my podcast. I think this result now frustrates me even more. Is I don't get the jump to firing Stewie Doo. I just don't, because this team was still within a game of being in the finals, and you fire a coach. It's like I know there's so much, there's positivity off this win because they're still right there on the ladder. I mean, they're 4 points back. They're only a game back of the finals. But
I mean,
with a caretaker coach, you aren't going to win. I just don't think you're going to win enough to get in. And I know that, and I know everybody's, you look at the results, they're trending backwards. You listen to the presser, and we're there's a gap. There's a 4 point gap. There's a 4 point gap after this round. And you're not going to be able to tell me that they couldn't have played this same type of game and got this same type of win over St. Kilda if Stewie Doo is there. So it's just, for me, this is frustrating because you can almost put a line through Gold Coast because of the fact they've got a caretaker coach. I think that's the most frustrating part with me is that I think Gold Coast jumped the gun and they actually screwed a chance to make the finals this year with so many teams at the bottom of the eight still stumbling a bit, that it's just very, very frustrating because I feel like I got to put a line through a team that honestly should still be in the discussion of making finals, but they're with a caretaker coach that's now got to try to get a team ready for finals. It does not look good, and that's frustrating for me because I feel like this was a jump the shark moment.
I think their remaining schedule does them very few favors. Although, playing GWS at Canberra, where the Giants haven't won in God knows how long, that's winnable. But it would be tough, I think, for this team to win four more games. Looking at the schedule, I thought actually what kind of validated some of the changes that they've made was seeing how they played in this game with a simpler game plan, as well as like against Port Adelaide, they played this great first half, counterattacked like crazy. It was like, where had that been in the prior 15 games? Where it's like there seemed to be some easy fixes that Stuart Dew just wasn't making. So the timing is weird,
Mm-hmm.
but I understand why the change was made.
Yeah, like I said, we'll have to see. I mean, if Gold Coast drops off these next 4 or 5 weeks and loses 6 games left in the season, if they lose four out of the two, you could say it's somewhat validated. But it is rather, I just, I don't know. Maybe it's the coach in me that I really kind of feel like I think they jumped the gun a round or two early before they were officially like out of the finals contention personally for me. So let's jump down to
It
Mark.
probably should have happened sooner or later. The timing was not right.
Yeah, I agree.
But
I completely agree. So, all right, let's jump down to Marvel Stadium where we saw an absolute smashing in a game that I honestly thought the smashing could be the other way around, as Carlton get a 50-point win over the red hot Port Adelaide Power. Again, I know the Power had some injuries. I know that they were a little bit weakened compared to most of the roster that they had had during this electric winning streak, but it is hard not to say that this looks like the Blues of last year that came just this short of missing finals. And I mean, confidence is back into the Blue Baggers to the point where they're talking like there's a good shot of this team getting in the finals. And with an electric game coming up this round, they could throw a absolute grenade into this season if they can do what I think they have a shot of doing, even after losing Harry Mackay in this game.
oh, it's definitely possible. You look at their upcoming schedule, you know, other than Collingwood, I don't see too many games that you don't think they at least have a chance to win. Even Collingwood, I mean,
I'm not
on the
gonna
right
I'm
day,
not
they
gonna
could run
call them out of
one.
Collingwood. I'm not. The way with their contested when their contested bowls in there, which could even out Collingwood's and their abilities with some of their midfielders. And Charlie Curnow is an absolute nightmare. It'll be fascinating. Now, not having Harry Mackay, I think, hurts in this game against Collingwood because they don't have a secondary big defender. But I think Carlton matches up well against Collingwood in the middle. And I think that's where, if you're going to beat Collingwood, that's where you have to at least even the game out. So, I mean, we can talk about that later, but this Carlton team, if they play like they did against Port Adelaide, they can beat anybody in the comp.
I think you could put an asterisk on any of their wins in this stretch, sure, between a dysfunctional Gold Coast team, a bottom three Hawthorn team, a dying Fremantle team, and now an injury riddled Port Adelaide team. But I like the way they've played. I think there's some
Mhm.
real substance to what they've changed. They're not just playing fast like they did first half last year. They've abandoned just bombing into 50, which really you should only be doing against a team like, say, Essendon, who can't match up physically with tall forwards. They're, handballing through the middle. They're playing with good pace. But what I really loved, and I saw it especially in the Frio game last week, I didn't see it quite as much this week, but last week against Frio was everywhere, was they put on a lot of pressure all over the ground, and that was new. And that's why I think there is a real substantial change here. I don't know if it's going to be enough to get them in. They may still need some help. They don't have any game that I look at as like, oh yeah, they're definitely going to win that one.
Mhm.
I love that round 24 Carlton GWS game could suddenly end up being super important. The one game,
Mhm.
you expect them to take care of West Coast this week, but then those final five, it's going to be spicy.
Completely agree with you that, like I said, I think Carlton, there's a few teams that I think could really spice up the eight, going forward with some of the matchups that they have. So again, I'm not gonna down tick Port Adelaide and say this proves Collingwood's the best team and there's nobody with. Port Adelaide was weakened. They had some injuries. They just finally ran into a team that just had a great day. I'm not as much worried about Port Adelaide because with the gap between them and Brisbane, it looks like those are going to be 1 and 2, meaning you got to go to
Yeah.
Adelaide or the MCG to get to the grand final, which is not going to be easy because Adelaide's going to be raucous if Port Adelaide's at home. So I'm not going to panic on Port Adelaide's form. It's frustrating because it allows another team into that finals mix, so it makes it that much more interesting, and fascinating. And like I said, it breeds for an intriguing game between them and between Carlton and Collingwood coming up. So, but I'm not going to bash Port Adelaide. I think they're going to get some injuries back. I think they'll be much more full strength. I think they'll probably hit finals going just fine. So, but I mean,
We're due to drop one
hat tip
Sunday.
to Carlton that finally maybe Coach Voss has got their heads out of a body cavity. I can't say on this podcast, and finally starting to play the footy that I think a lot of people expected going into this season. And it's always fun to sometimes see the old blue baggers have some success after many,
I
many years of not having success.
I am definitely not a Carlton fan by any stretch, but I enjoy the way they've played the last few weeks.
Mhm.
I will say this about Port. We talked about the possibility of peaking too early. That is the one concern there. Like,
Mhm.
especially Zach Butters, he was in unbelievable form, and now he's just a good player instead of playing in Brownlow form. Dan Houston, though, he had a day, 41 disposals, 9 intercepts, and it was nice to get Xavier Dersma back. So as they get more towards full form, I think they'll be fine. The
Mhm.
guys who stood out for me for Carlton in this game, I think the obvious ones, Jack Silvani, who's back to like his best possible form, which I love. The guy is like the most Carlton person to ever live. Like his family is as Carlton as it gets. So for him to be playing well is really, really cool.
Mhm.
Jesse Motlop coming in a few minutes to game time as a late change and kicking four
Kicking
goals was
four
great.
goals.
I like Motlop. I've always been a Motlop fan. I think even when he hasn't done that much, it's like he's an exciting, electrifying player, and just cool things happen when he gets involved on offense. And we saw that in this game.
Mhm. Yep,
And
agreed.
then
Go
other than
ahead.
that, Tom DeConing coming back in, he didn't just hold his own against Scott Lysette. He outplayed him,
Mhm.
which is wild.
Yeah.
And Mitch McGovern, I think he's been the best barometer for this team. As McGovern has gone, the whole team has gone. Start of the year, decent. Then was really bad, had Blues fans calling for his head. And now the last
Mhm.
few weeks, he's been much, much better. And it's no coincidence that the whole team's been much better as a result.
Yeah, I mean, they're for a while in the middle of the year that they were looking at. where was Tom DeConing going to go play because he wasn't getting the opportunity. So we'll have to see. It's this is a Carleton team I'm really interested to see over these next few rounds. So let's jump down to the cat. Let's jump down to the cattery. And I know there was a bunch of drama on this. I'm not going to open that can of worms like I did last week, absolutely eviscerating Caro because I think the discussion about trying to move this game to the MCG was utterly ridiculous and pointless and stupid. It's Geelong's home game. If Geelong wants to play Geelong wants to play in front of three-quarters of a stadium, that is their prerogative. That is not the AFL's. I'm glad that they played it down there. And it kind of proved why, because the Cats get a nice win, 77 points, 122-45. And Ethan, I know you are a Cats man. How happy are you? Jezza Cameron is back, and the Cats are kind of showing a little bit of what they showed last year, that electric footy. How happy are you that this Cats team might be hitting their stride at the perfect time?
It's one thing to blow a team out once. It's another to blow them out twice and do it in a completely different fashion. Because the first time they played Essendon, it was just being the more physical team, being tougher, tackling way more. This game, Essendon was there physically. It was the turnovers where we killed them. The last goal of the game by Tyson Stengel was only Geelong's second goal from stoppage. 31 of their first 32 points came off turnovers. And it was a mix of forcing turnovers and some that were just kind of being gift wrapped. And it was just like, all right, we'll take this. We'll go score the other way. A whole lot of individual performers stood up. Jack Henry had a great first quarter that helped set the tone. He had a couple of early intercepts. Max Holmes, career high 33 disposals. Tom Atkins put up a Tom Liberatore type line with the 28 disposals, 16 contested possession, 12 tackles, 9 clearances. Brian Myers in his 100th game gets another 2 assists. Could have had a couple more. Mark Blitzovs once again plays way above what the stats show. He's such a ridiculous special athlete. Zach Guthrie was very smooth. Tyson Stengel manhandled Jake Kelly. I always have to pause. Like, is it Jake Kelly? Is it Josh Kelly? I get them mixed up all the time. It was Jake Kelly. Josh Kelly is with GWS.
GWS wingster, yeah, winger. Yep. So
Dylan
gone.
Stewart, reliable as ever. I mean, he's had like one bad game in 3 years, which would be the game at Frio this year. Like, you're entitled to 1 or 2 bad games a year. He's had one in like 3 seasons. Tom Hawkins, once again, just Essendon don't have a matchup for him. I feel bad for Brandon Zerk-Thatcher getting trotted out there to face a guy that he's just nowhere near physically right to match up with.
Mm-hmm.
Like, a guy like Ben Mackay would go a long way. I don't know if Ben Mackay is a great player or if he's even decent, but just having him would allow Essendon to slide around the rest of their defense. Because, like I said, it's a similar problem to Frio. They don't have the big bodies to win those marking contests. And they got killed on those. Also, Zach Guthrie was really smooth. And Isaac Smith did a great job after being managed last week. He was able to find space all over where so he was able to get to open areas, rack up the uncontested possessions, and set the counterattack off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is the Cats team on their day that they still have pretty much the same roster together from last year. That they are going to be a pain, and now they're in the finals hunt. Now they're in the finals run. It'd be scary to watch this Cats team continue to go. Let's jump over the Adelaide Oval with the
I do want to
shocker.
mention a couple of Essendon things real quick.
Sure, go ahead.
The one guy who I thought really stepped up and played a really good game for the Bombers was Ben Hobbs, who I just thought of him as a forward last year. Cool that he stepped into the midfield, but I wanted to see what Sam Wiedemann could do. There are ways to make yourself valuable without kicking goals as a forward. He did not do that. I'd be shocked if he's in the lineup this coming week. You can't play him right now. Archie Perkins looked very inexperienced playing along the boundary, and it was a difficult night for Nick Martin too, who otherwise has had a really nice season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this was just a bad night overall because even Zach Merritt was down only with 18 possessions in this game, and normally he's
And
a
he copped a fine for staging.
Yep.
Pretty well deserved one.
Oh boy. So let's jump over to it. And what I have to say is the shocker of the round. It didn't shock me that GWS found another way to get a win. It was where and who. The Adelaide Oval over the Crows, who had been absolutely damn near unbeatable at home this year. A 14-point win by the Giants, 71-57. And I mean, I may be a Sydney Swan supporter, but I tip my cap. Kingsley is just doing everything he can coaching wise to help this GWS Giants team. There's the talent, there's the effort, and this is without Tom Green. That makes it even more impressive. Tom Green was a laid out in this game, did not play in this game, and to still get the win over a very good Crows team, tip of the cap, Kingsley. GWS is right there. I mean, there is a chance the Giants may make the finals this year. How mental is that?
I thought at the start of the year this was, clearly bottom 4 or 5. Then a few weeks into the season, it's like, all right, they're clearly a cut above the Hawks, Roos, and Eagles, but probably behind everyone else. I did say that like the gap between 15th and 16th was way bigger than the gap between 14th and 15th. And then it turns out, oh no, they're in this thing.
Yeah, it's
I'm
just
I'm
absolutely
really
crazy.
impressed with just the overall season that they've had. Like they don't really have to do anything else for this season to be a success. Like I already said that at the bye week. I mean, what more could you ask of them? I had such low expectations. Their remaining schedule is tough.
Mm-hmm.
They could win like 5 of their final 6 or just drop all 6, and I wouldn't be surprised either way.
Mm-hmm.
But like you look at, I don't know what your expectations were at the start of the year, but I had said, all right, beat a finalist because last year you didn't beat anyone who made the 8, and play some exciting games because almost all of their games were in like that 4 to 5 goal range. I wanted to see excitement. This year they have absolutely provided that. So I was locked into the Geelong post game coverage, so I wanted to see everything Brian related, milestone game,
Mm-hmm.
the messy stuff. And I checked back, and all of a sudden, the Giants have gone from down 3 goals to up by 8 points. And then they get the late icing on the cake goal, and it was like, whoa, what happened?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember talking to a few of my Crows mates, and they said that the second half just did not go anywhere near what they wanted. They definitely dropped off. And again, the Giants, they're just a pesky side. They stay in games. They just don't go away. You have to literally put them down to beat them. But when it comes to it, as you asked, you said, what were my expectations? I don't think right now in ninth, they're not super ahead too far of where, because honestly, when I started the year, and again, it's a little bit off, but I had West Coast, North Melbourne, Hawthorn, and Essendon as your bottom 4 teams, just because I thought Essendon was a basket case with everything. I knew Coach Scott would come in, he'd get a few more wins, but I wasn't expecting much. And then I kind of sat with Gold Coast, Richmond, Adelaide, St. Kilda, and GWS, kind of that next 5. So they're not too far off of where I kind of thought they were. Was I expecting 17 rounds in for them to be percentage points out of the finals? Absolutely not. But this is a Giants team. There is a ton of talent there. There is a ton of skill there. It was, can Kingsley get them to play the type of footy he wanted? And would it be successful? If he does, it was definitely an option because he has a pretty good list. I don't think Leon Cameron left him a bare cupboard. I think he left him with a lot of talent. It's just a team that financially they had to play overs to keep guys at the at GWS. So for them to finally be able to kind of have some success after Leon Cameron, this first season, it's interesting to see how it goes. I agree with you. This is one of those, looking at their schedule, they could win every single game all the way up to the finals, and they could drop every single game because every game is going to be competitive. They're not going to blow you away. Yes, they're talented, but they're not going to blow you away. That's just not the way GWS has played this entire season. They're a scrappy bunch. They like a tough competitive type of game. And when they get going, they get going. If you can stop them, you can change the game rather quickly on them. So I'd be fascinated to see how it goes, especially this week with Gold Coast. 2 teams that, I mean, they're kind of masters of their own destinies when it comes to it. Both teams could be very, very good on their day, and both teams could have average days. It really just kind of depends. So I don't know about yeah, again. I don't want to bash the Crows. I think the Crows are a team that they're young. They're in it. They just need to grow up a little bit. The Josh Rosselli situation, I will not be surprised if he gets dropped this round. I think the strike is gonna not only get him suspended, but I think it's gonna see him multiple rounds sitting on the bench to kind of say, "Hey, kid, cool it." So I think this is a lost opportunity for a Crows team that was hanging on to the finals. This could have been the proverbial piece of straw that breaks the camel's back, unfortunately. And this is a Crows team I can't wait to watch grow up because they're still a relatively young side. Yes, you've got Taylor Walker. Yes, you've got Rory Sloan, but there's still a ton of super young talent that I think I cannot wait to watch grow even more at the Tricolors.
Yeah, here's the thing with the Crows. If you wanted a big jump forward this year, you might not get that. There's been like a linear progression over the last couple of years, or they move up 2, 3 spots up the ladder each year. And I'm sure it's frustrating, and especially now you look at their remaining schedule, you only really have one, maybe two games you feel really good about, and you're going to need to go 4-2. Basically, you're going to have to win one on the road and or sweep showdown. And you go to play the D's and Lions on the road. They put themselves in a really tough spot. But I'm just so impressed with GWS because my perception of them was, yeah, they've got midfield talent, they've got forward talent, but I didn't think they had much there defensively. And you held Adelaide to 57 in their own building. Obviously, Harry Himmelberg defending is great. Sam Taylor, phenomenal. I think he might be the best defender in the sport, not named Tom Stewart. And then I think just looking at their roster, though, was like if you were telling me, oh, they're gonna, take Nick Haynes out of the lineup and still be great defensively, I didn't see that coming.
Mhm.
To do this, though, no Tom Green, no Finn Callahan. It's a great win.
Very impressive. Sam Taylor was all Australian last year, so this doesn't shock me. I mean, he's for a slight sized guy, he does a lot of really good things for that. I mean, unfortunately, some of his injuries earlier in the year, I think, may keep him from being an all Australian because the games that he has played in, he's played very, very well. So it'll be interesting to see how this Giants team is going to be fun to keep an eye on because they give you a little bit of everything as the season goes on. So unfortunately, we moved to the Sunday part of the docket, and I don't know about you, sir, but I was not exactly looking forward to the Sunday docket because you have three of the bottom four teams and Richmond playing in these final two games. We see Hawthorn get a 48-point win over North Melbourne, 88-40. I'm going to be very simple when it comes to it. This North Melbourne team, I don't know what to say. I don't blame Ratton for how they're playing. I don't blame the coaching staff. I just think this is a team that's going to take several more years, a couple more draft classes, some free agents to bring in. There's just still a deficit somewhere. I can't put my finger on what it is. And a Hawthorne team that I think, surprisingly, for as deep a cut as they did, stripping away Jaeger O'Meara and some of the experienced, you almost kind of have to look and go, it's almost been a great move because they have really opened up some of the young midfielders on this team. And I think they may have sped up their rebuild by a couple of seasons because they were so aggressive getting rid of some of the experienced talent on this roster.
Oh yeah, I think it was the right move. Like, yeah, if you had kept some of those guys around, maybe you're still in that mix to barely scrape into finals, but they have absolutely increased their hopes of being a legitimate flag contender down the road. What's the point of trying to barely scrape into the finals if you're just going to get crushed? They made the right moves, and you see each week, this mix of Connor Nash, who's had a great year, Jai Newcomb, uh, Josh Ward, uh, Will Day. I once
Mhm.
again, I should not be confusing him with Sam Day because Will Day plays every week, but I keep mixing that up. Great game from Connor McDonald. Great game from Jarman Impey. Dylan Moore, 27 disposals. I know he hasn't been in great goal kicking for him this year, but still, 27 disposals out of him is pretty sweet.
Mhm. And what was it? James Warple had 32 and a goal as well from the midfield too. So there's and surprisingly, the come over from Port Adelaide, Carl Amon has not done too bad on the wing over at Hawthorn. So it's like this is the Hawthorn team. Like I said, you look at it again, they're gonna have their bumps, they're gonna have their bruises, but I think, like I said, Sam Mitchell, I think, has kind of made himself look like a genius because he has set his team up to be a little bit better, a little bit quicker, and he hasn't taken the fall from grace as far as I think some people kind of thought after their off season. So it, again, bottom two of the bottom teams in the competition. North Wardlaw going down with another hamstring injury has got me concerned that this, I think you might need to shut this kid down and really get him looked at by a specialist because this is the third hamstring injury in less than 2 years for him. And in fact, it cost him a little bit of his junior season. So I worry that this is going to be a Luke Shuey type of situation where soft tissue injuries could be a problem. And that is really going to hurt for a kid that was taken 3 overall. And a lot of people were looking at him and Sheasel as being the up and coming forces to drag to bring this North Melbourne team back from oblivion back into contention. And this is really going to be hard for this young man to deal with constant hamstring injuries. So I think they need to get him looked at. I think they need to shut him down for the year, get him a nice rest, get that hamstring back, have it looked at by a specialist if possible, just to see if there's anything that they can maybe do therapy wise. So then going into next season, he can hit the preseason training and hopefully get a full season without any injury hiccups.
You got to play the long term game. You're at earliest trying to compete to play finals in what 2025 at best.
Mm-hmm.
There's you got to go long term. My thing with North, and I saw it in this game, which I didn't watch that closely. What I did see is the same thing I've been seeing for a while. They just don't have anyone to provide any sort of resistance defensively, whether that's in their own 50 in the midfield. You've got a couple of really good midfielders. Luke Davies-Uniacke was the top player in this game by ranking points. Bailey Scott's been good. Harry Sheasel's been, I'd say, better than advertised because he's been playing a position nobody ever expected, and he's been great there. It's just this, you look at their roster and you ask, like, which of these guys do you expect to be playing the next time you're a serious contender? And it's maybe a third of the playing group at most.
Mm-hmm.
And it's clear that their issues are on the defensive side.
Yeah, Griffin Lowe going down doesn't help, but he's not exactly been setting the world on fire on the
Yeah,
defensive side.
still,
So
it's like who comes in. It's a drop off. So there's a college football podcast called The Solid Verbal, and they have they try to come up with a theme each week, like Show and Tell Saturday or Spider-Man Saturday, something alliterative. So I call this "Seems Like a Good Idea to Make Other Plans Sunday."
I remember I kind of alluded to that in our podcast last week when I said the last 2 games of the day are not going to be ones that many people are going to be paying attention to. So unfortunately, like I said, and again, this is absolutely no offense to my North fans, my Hawthorn fans, Eagles, or even Richmond fans, but this was not exactly a Saturday slate. I was going, yay, I'm going to stay up and watch the games. I went, yeah, I'm going to bed. Night. I'll watch the highlights in the next morning. So, and I was not too disappointed. I have to, we'll jump to the last game because I will say this. As I watched the highlights of this game, I was shocked that this Richmond team that I think can be absolutely merciless at times did not do what I thought they were going to do to this Eagles team. And I'm not sure whether I should compliment the Eagles for stepping up defensively and playing much better or rag on the Richmond Tigers for really blowing an opportunity to get a 50, 60, 70, 80 point percentage boosting win here. A 38-point win, 98-60. And like I said, I don't know which way to go. Do I compliment West Coast on playing better defense, or do I rag on Richmond for not putting the sword to a very vulnerable West Coast Eagles team?
I mean, they started off kicking 2-7. They brought the lead out to 47 and then kind of let their foot off the gas. And normally you would say, oh, they have a draw. Percentage isn't really going to be a factor, but now all of a sudden percentage is the difference between them and Carlton, and it's a gap of nearly 12%. So it is significant. I still won't look at it too much. I think it's still a pain going out to Perth. It's still, the psychology of getting up to not just beat a team, but absolutely crush them is a difficult element. So I'm not gonna look too much into this one. Ultimately Richmond did what they needed to. If they win 4 more games, they are a finalist. They have remaining games against Hawthorn and North, and you take care of those, and you got to just win 2 others.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Again, I think this is a little bit of a drop off, a little bit for Richmond again. I mean, could you afford to do it and have a drop off game in a game you're pretty sure you're going to win? I agree with that. But the ruthlessness that I was expecting wasn't there. Is that going to hurt them? I'm one of those that in a game that you really should have a dominant win and you don't, could it show that you're not taking it as seriously as you probably should have? I'm fascinated to see it again. Richmond get the win. West Coast again, competitive, a little bit more competitive, which I appreciate that they're having that because it was getting farcical there for a bit. The witches hats that they were becoming there for a bit. So I don't know. It kind of left a sour taste in my mouth. The end of this one, just because, like I said, I think I was expecting Richmond to be a little bit more dominant in this game, and they just weren't. So that is it. That is the 9 games from this round. A great chat on that, Ethan. I really loved your kind of thought process on this. So we go to my burning questions. These are some of the questions that I've thought about that I really want to know what you think about this, because there's tons of storylines. As you said, there's tons of things that so many different outlets are talking about. And I came up with 3, and then we have Ross's question here a little bit. And I'm fascinated because as a couple of Americans, and for you, sir, also covering baseball, the topic that's been talked about that Ross wants to talk about, I think will be fascinating to hear your thoughts on this. So we'll start off with the Blue Baggers. As I kind of said, on the resurgence, I agree. Maybe not the most marquee wins in the world with some of the teams they played, but are the Blues back? Or did they capitalize on a weakened power team and they're going to get humbled this week versus Collingwood?
They play West Coast this week.
Oh, West Coast. Yep. It's the calling. I keep wanting the Collingwood game to be this week. My apologies.
Yeah. I This week didn't convince me as much as the prior week did. And again, I don't know if they're going to be able to make finals. They still got to win 4 more games. Even if you take care of the 4 points this week that you expect, 46 isn't going to cut it. 48, their percentage would likely be good enough to if they were to somehow have a second draw. But they're still, I don't know if they're going to get there, but I'm much more optimistic about the future of the Blues than I was a few weeks ago. I don't think they need to burn everything down. I don't think they need a completely new core. I think they're going to be just fine big picture, which I certainly couldn't say a month ago.
For me, here's how I approach this, and I'm only gonna say it is because that there are still some matchups that are gonna affect the bottom of the 8. Like you have Essendon play the Western Bulldogs. That's 7v8. That's just ahead of Carlton. Carlton gets the win. One of those two, unless they get a draw, isn't going to win. So they're going to stay at 36. You win, you're in. There's a potentially in the finals in the next. So it's like I'm not going to say they're back. I want to see that matchup against Collingwood in a couple of weeks, but if they continue to play the way they're playing, they are back and they are going to be very, very scary come finals time, because unlike last year where they were in the finals all year, they were playing great footy for most of the year. They're getting it going at the right time of the season. And I always say that catching a team getting hot around finals time is much better than a team that's been hot during the season. So it'll be fascinating to see how that goes. So we jump to the other topic I've been marveling over, and that is GWS. And we kind of discussed it in that, are GWS a legit finals chance?
I mean, all they got to do is go 3-3 in their last 5. Although, I mean, if they do go 3-3, percentage probably isn't on their side.
Mhm.
You think let's see. I mean, they don't have any gimme game going forward, but I wouldn't want to face them right now. I really like how they've played. It's not just that they're on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 game winning streak,
Mhm.
that they've won in different ways. It isn't just, oh, they have this one strength or this one weakness. You know exactly how to prepare for them. They've shown a lot of versatility. And one guy who hasn't gotten a ton of credit with GWS that I just love watching, and I don't get why it took so long for him to get into this proper role, is Callum Brown. Last year, I remember watching them play Hawthorn in wet weather, and he kicked 4 goals on a day where nobody else could kick anything.
Mhm.
And the more they let him do as a forward, the better. Like, we know he's talented, and yet there were times when they would run him out there as a defender. Like, I know they don't have as many good defenders, but that's one I never understood. So I'm glad that he's finally in the right spot.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting. I honestly, I think they're there. It'll be, like I said, it'll be everybody around them playing each other. I think will give them that opportunity. Again, this is a team that the Gold Coast matchup will be fascinating because who wins this one? If they drop this game to Gold Coast, then I think they could be in a little bit of trouble because that again with some tough games still to come. But I'm not gonna put anything off this Kingsley team because they've been pesky all season, and I can't rule them out. I just really can't. Maybe it's because of my previous host Ross is a huge GWS fan, so he's losing his mind a little bit to see GWS jumping up and potentially making finals. So, all right, we will jump to it. Ross's question of the week, Ethan. So I'm going to throw it to Ross here to let us know the question of the week. Ross, take it away.
O'Connor, that's a beautifully weighted kick.
Donnie, Ethan, good to see you guys. My question for you guys this week is coming on the reports that the AFL is apparently looking to doing a wild card round. Now, here in the States with our American football, we're already super well known and acquainted with the wild card round. Everyone loves it. We really, it's a big deal. It's a really big deal, and it's a really exciting round of footy or football for us. But there's a lot of people that already think it's not really a big deal in the NFL, but in the AFL, there's a lot of people that think that the field is already too saturated with teams. So, is this wild card stuff a bunch of baloney? Is it just trying to get people talking? Do you think it's like an actual thing? And is this going to be good for the league, or is there already too many teams that make the finals? Let me know. You guys, thank you so much to the fans. Let us know in the comments as well. But Donnie, Ethan, have a great rest of your show.
So here's what
O'Connor, that's a beautifully weighted kick.
I'm interested what you think of this, and I'll read this again for you in a little bit. Do you think the finals field is already oversaturated with too many teams at 8, or would a wild card round be beneficial for the competition? Because I don't know about you, I'm hearing tons of people talk about wild cards adding 9 and 10, and then having them playing 7, 8, and then jumping into the finals bracket that they already have with an extra game. So we'll go back in 3, 2, 1. Thanks, Ross. A great question and a very fitting one, considering we have a guy that covers baseball over here that has wild cards. So, really quick, we'll redo the question, Ethan. Do you think the finals are oversaturated, or would a wild card round be beneficial for the competition?
It's tough because if we expanded to 10, that would be more than half the teams getting in. As the league is currently constructed, just the balance of power, I think there are definitely, like within this season, at least 10 teams that can lay claim to finals. I think it will be, if you told me that the teams that finish 7 through 10 have to battle it out for one more week, I wouldn't mind that within the scope of this season. But year in and year out, I'm not a huge fan of the idea. I am a big fan of the idea of not having a week without footy before finals. I wouldn't mind having those couple of games. One guy on Twitter, I believe it was AFL Glicko, Rory Kilpatrick, he proposed a different type of 10-team finals ladder where basically the top 6 all end up with a double chance. If you go to his Twitter, you can see he made a
Mhm.
Looks like an Excel or Google Sheet
Yeah, I think
document for them.
I saw that. That was it's very interesting. It's I liked the idea. I just think it gets so convoluted. So and maybe this is a little bit of me, and I know some of the people that listen to me know this is I'm a huge AFLW person. So I know I've heard so many people, I don't like the week without footy. Well, there is footy. There's women's footy because the first round of the women's season is that week. And I know that's not everybody's cup of
That is
tea,
good timing.
and I know that's not everybody's cup of tea. And again, I don't tell you that you have to watch it. I just think many people have dismissed it without actually seeing it is a little bit of a different game. So I don't think there isn't any footy. There's just no men's footy. So I'm not, but I don't. I'm one of those. I don't like it because I think that as until you get 20, and even at 20, I don't like it because you gotta kind of make a stance of what are the best 8 teams to make it. Are you prioritizing mediocrity by giving 9 and 10? Well, this is a season where you could argue that you're not prioritizing mediocrity because there's a lot of good teams. They're not great teams that are in that 9, 10, 11, 12 spot. So this is one of those seasons where that argument kind of makes sense, but there have been seasons where the top 8 are the best 8 teams and ninth gets a little sus gets a little suspect. So I'm one of those where as much as I like the idea, I don't think it's going to be something that they're going to throw into. There are enough AFL purists that don't want to see much change to the game. So I can kind of see this one kind of getting hitting the chopping block pretty quickly. As interesting as it may make things, I don't see it happening. So
Yeah, it's you wish you could adjust it yearly, and obviously with TV rights and stuff, that could never happen. That's how I feel
mhm,
about college football. Like some years, college football might have 6 worthy playoff teams. Some years they might only have 3,
mhm.
and you wish you could, be like dynamic with that. And unfortunately, that just doesn't work in the
Nope.
world of sports and TV deals, which is a shame. So I think, I mean, if I had to choose, I'm not going to be super mad if it went to 10. I would rather see it stay at 8, but I wouldn't be like, oh, this is the worst thing ever if it went to 10.
Yeah, I'm the same way. It's a couple more games of footy. I'm not going to make a big deal, but I don't see it happening. But if it happened, I'm not going to complain about it. So, alrighty. And then I know you're a diehard Cats fan, so I got to ask this: your Cats are in the finals situation now. How damaging can they be if they make finals, and how far do you think they could go?
I still need to see a legit road win to really believe. But I mean, we've seen this team at their best. It's just we haven't seen them play their best outside of Victoria. So I'm not saying you have to beat the Lions. I guess, Collingwood is technically going to be an away game. I want to see a good showing at Brisbane. Then I will really start to take things seriously. I feel good about our odds of playing finals. Um, you know, Pretty much just got to go 3-3 the rest of the way. So you could, in theory, lose to all 3 of Port, Brisbane, and Collingwood and still play finals. I would love it to not come down to round 24. I think there is a window. I think we saw some of it this past week where, you have a good enough midfield and then play really well in both 50s. This week the midfield was more than good enough. I don't expect that to happen every week. I mean, Tom Atkins, that was like 100th percentile performance. If he just gives like 80th percentile, that's great. I think this team is one that I wouldn't want to face. I still just to go on a really deep run, I mean, you're probably going to have to either beat one of Brisbane or Port on the road or go through Collingwood, if not both. Like there's no path to a grand final that does not involve beating at least one of those teams away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. If the Cats team that's plays down at GMHBA against Essendon shows up against any of those top 3 teams, they can beat any of them.
Oh, certainly.
That's my honest to God opinion. I agree with you. I mean, if you go to the Gab and beat the Lions, honestly, there isn't a team that I don't think you can beat. I think with the defense that you have and the structure that Coach Scott has, I think there is not a team in the league that you can't beat. It's just on the day, how does it go? And then how healthy are you going into that game? Because I the Cats showed last year their best is better than most. So it'll be fascinating to watch this Cats team continue to develop. And they could be that scary team for the first time outside of the four to really challenge for a premiership flag since the Doggies back in 16.
I think what's scary is, you talked about that defense, especially the jump forward that Jack Henry took this past week. If you get
Mhm.
that sort of version of him and Zach Guthrie and just a little more out of Sam DeConing, who I think has taken some positive strides in the last couple weeks, then it's scary.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. So it'll be very, very interesting. So let's go to it. The next section, next couple of sections. Again, I kind of take over the podcast a little bit for some fun things that I started doing a few years ago. And I have my team of the week that I do where I kind of go through some of the statistics and watch the games and I pick out my team of the week. And unlike the All Australian, I try to be sure that guys are in the positions that they normally are. So really quick, Ethan, I'm not sure how much you dig into the team selections and everything like that. So I'm going to run through fullbacks, halfbacks, wings, centers, and pick my starters, and then a bench of one ruck, one defender, one midfielder, and one forward. So starting in the defense, we start in the fullback line again. Coach, as they say in the States, defense wins championships. So in the fullback line, my team of the week starts with the Western Bulldogs, Latham Vandermeer. You kick a goal from the defense, you're going to get a little bit of a lean. It's one of the things that I kind of steps you over a little bit for my team of the week. GWS is Sam Taylor, 16 intercept possessions in this game. Absolutely incredible. And Darcy Moore as well. Several, I think he had 5 or 6 just in the first quarter for the Collingwood Magpies. Off the halfback
My
line,
favorite Sam Taylor stat, I just want to mention, 100% time on ground, too.
he doesn't come off. What an incredible defender. All right, halfback line sees Sydney's Ollie Florent kicked 2 goals from the halfback line. Again, you get a tick from old coach. Gold Coast Rory Atkins and Hawthorne's Jarman Impey round out the backs. We go to the mids. Again, I give the wings some love. We start off Collingwood's Josh Dacos, and on the other side, Hawthorne's Carl Amon. In the center square, we see the Western Bulldogs, Marcus Bontempelli, Collingwood's Taylor Adams, and Port Adelaide's Connor Rosie, with the rock being big Max Gone from the Melbourne Demons. At the forward line, at the half forwards, we see center half forward Christian Petrarca, Gold Coast Jack Lukosius, and Carlton's Jack Silvani will be the half forward lines. Full forward line sees Big Tom Hawkins from the Geelong Cats, Collingwood Jamie Elliott, and Sydney's Tom Papley. We go to the bench. The defender is Carlton's Nick Newman. The ruck is St. Kilda's Rowan Marshall. The midfielder is Shai Bolton from the Richmond Tigers. And Carlton's Jesse Motlop is the forward from this round. So that's my team of the week. I don't know how much you go into the team of the week, but kind of your thoughts on the team that I've selected this week.
I don't see too many objections there. I think that's a pretty solid group. I'm glad that Motlop did get his recognition. Also love how many of those guys are on my fantasy team drafting on the Donnie, having both Rory Atkins and Jarman Impey. I mean, I got Nathan Broad only gave me 22 points this week. I had a down week from Kyle Langford. He only gave me 41. I left 52 points on the bench by playing Jack Ross instead of Max Holmes, and my team still broke 1,700 because I had 7 guys hit at least 100 points. Impey, Powell, Atkins, Rory Laird, who I captained, Taylor Adams, Stephen Canelio, and Brian Myers.
Makes me kick myself. I had Max Holmes, but I dropped him. But the funny part about it is that the midfield that I have on mine, I couldn't squeeze him in because what was it? My midfield as of right now is Zach Merritt, Dom Shee, Jacob Hopper, James Warple, and Jamie and Jack Crisp. So it's hard. I couldn't squeeze Max in. I couldn't squeeze Max Holmes in there. So I know exactly what you're saying there. So and then
when Chad Warner's healthy, I may have that same problem. It's like
I know it's hard to squeeze.
Parker,
Yeah,
if you take out Matt Rowell, Trelaw,
exactly.
good problem to have.
Yeah, exactly. It's always a fun one there. So, all right, and then we go to my homage to the fourth and long part of the history of the podcast, and we do power rankings. Now, as I tell everybody, I go off form. The last 5 games, wins in a row, and how that's going. So there may be a little bit of interesting here. So we'll start off number 5, your Geelong Cats. Number 4, the Richmond Tigers. Number 3, the Carlton Blues. Number 2, the GWS Giants, and the number 1 team, the Collingwood Magpies. So again, unfortunately, Port loses. You have a couple of teams in Geelong and Richmond that have nice little win streaks going, so they jump in there. I know it seems stiff on Port for all of the wins in a row, but you lose a game in your final 5, it kind of takes you down a little bit. So thoughts on the power ranking so far?
In terms of like the what have you done for me lately rankings, that's pretty
Pretty
good.
much.
I think you could still argue for Port. You could argue for Carlton to be in front of GWS, but I think I mean, maybe you argue Port over Richmond, but I think you got the right 5.
Yeah. So and again, it's all kind of circumspect. Everybody does it a little bit differently. So, alrighty, and then the coup d'etat always end the episode with tipping. So here we go, sir. I know we're a little away from the start of the rounds. I know teams still have to come. The injury list comes out tomorrow, which is a fun little joke, inside joke with our fantasy team. Is that for some weird reason, whenever I put the injury list out, it always has a picture of Dollhouse on it. So we have the proverbial joke of, do we see the picture of Dollhouse or not in the group message? So, alrighty, so we'll get to it. First game of the round, Friday night. Unfortunately, no Thursday night footy this week. Goes Friday night footy at Marvel Stadium. Sees Essendon v the Western Bulldogs. Who do you like in this one?
I like the Dogs. I think their midfield just outclasses Essendon, and I think Aaron Naughton or someone out of Aaron Naughton, Cody Waitman, or Jamari Ugelhagen kicks at least 4.
I'm with you on that one. I got the Doggies. I think Aaron Naughton and Jamar Hagan have a day out against a relatively undersized defensive line for the Bombers. MCG Richmond v Hawthorn. I have the Tigers in this one again. As much as I like James Sicily is back, so that it solidifies them defensively. They're tough, but I like the way Richmond is playing right now. They've kind of got their mojo back. I like the Tigers in this one.
Yeah, I would agree on that one. Looks like 96% of people that have tipped the game so far through the official AFL tipping competition have gone Richmond.
Mm-hmm. So, alrighty, Marvel Stadium, Carlton v West Coast. I don't think I'm jumping too far. Carlton and maybe Carlton big.
Yeah, maybe the Eagles are able to keep this within like 30-ish points, but Carlton is in good shape already percentage-wise. It
Alrighty,
would be
up.
hilarious if West Coast won this game, though.
It would be. I would crack up so bad. And again, no offense, Blue Baggers, but I would laugh so hard if that happened because it would be an atomic bomb in Blue Baggers Nation. And I know it's several Blues podcasts that I almost want to listen to just to hear how they respond if that were to happen. So I don't think it will, but it'd be quite the interesting spectacle. So we jump up to the GABA, one of the games of the round, sees the Brisbane Lions host the Cats. As a Cats man, can the Cats go up to the GABA and get a win? Are the Lions too good?
I do think it's tough to go, a perfect 11-0 at home. So I wouldn't be shocked if the Lions drop a home game. You look at their remaining home fixtures, you have the Cats, you have the Crows, and sorry, page is loading. You have the Saints. I wouldn't be shocked. I think this is the one they'd be most likely to lose, but I still think this is Brisbane's game. Maybe I don't know, I feel a little bit better about it than I would if this was like a late night game. I don't know if that has anything to it, but like you never see it feels like the Lions, at least in the home and away season, never lose a late night home game.
Mm-hmm. The prime time home game under the lights. Yeah, it makes sense. This is one of those of I think the next 3 or 4 that it's because of where the game is played is the reason that I'm tipping it. And I know it seems fickle, but it really is truthful. Brisbane at home is really, really good. I think this is a Geelong team that if this was a GMHBA, I tip the Cats all day long. But because it's at Brisbane and Brisbane is very, very good at home, this is very difficult. The Lions hold serve at home, but I think this is a cracking game. I think this comes down to the fourth quarter. I think Danaher, Hipwood, Cameron kicks a goal late and just edges the Cats. But I think this is an absolute barn burner on Saturday evening down in Australia. We jump out Fremantle as Optus Oval sees the Fremantle Dockers trying to save a little bit of face against the Sydney Swans, still trying to fight for the slim chance of making finals. Who do you like in this one?
I like the Swans to settle the score with the Dockers, who will be a win at Optus for the second year in a row. I think Fremantle's just done, although they do have history on their side because teams in 15th place have won 8 straight games, and the Dockers now sit in 15th.
As I said, this is a home tip in Optus Stadium. Fremantle seems to play better at home. As much as I'd love the Swans to win this one, maybe I'm going reverse psychology here. I'm tipping Fremantle so that maybe the Swans win a little bit. So I'm a tip Fremantle only because Optus Stadium, never easy to go out west and get a win. Over to Adelaide Oval. Go ahead.
On literally on the official competition. So I get it.
All right, Adelaide Oval 1v2. I am so angry that this is at the same time as the Swans game because I wanted to watch this game. Port Adelaide, Collingwood, Adelaide Oval. I'm gonna say it. I think Port Adelaide win this one. Collingwood leaves the sanctity of the MCG or Victoria, where they have the majority of the fans. And when they have less fans, they go down a notch or two when it comes to their intensity. I think Port Adelaide is going to have this game sold out. I think the Adelaide fans are going to be feral. They're going to be up and about. And I think Collingwood falls to the power in this one. I have the power.
I do too. I don't know how much. I think, maybe they win it by a couple goals. Maybe they win it by like 30 points and do it in really convincing fashion. But I definitely see them winning it. I think if Collingwood win this, it's like your signature tight Collingwood win. Also, I love this matchup every time because it's probably going to set the record for most middle fingers shown on camera because the crowd shots are going to be every.
I'm not going to disagree. Couple of very, very, very feral fan bases there, so that it's going to be bad. It's going to be fascinating for sure. So, all right, up to Manuka Oval is GWS host Gold Coast. Again, GWS at home. As much as I think Coach King with Gold Coast should be able to continue on it, I just think it runs into the worst possible opportunity here. I like the Giants in this one to get another win.
This one's tough. I mean, on one hand, the Giants are due to finally win in Canberra. On the other hand, they're on a 5-game win streak. I don't know if they're good enough to make it 6. This might be the toughest game of the round for me because I could see either team winning in blowout fashion.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to go with the Tom Green fan club here. Hopefully he's healthy. Hopefully he plays. And I will go GWS.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting one for sure. All right, MCG, Melbourne v. the Adelaide Crows. Who do you like in this one?
I like the D's. Just hard to take the Crows outside of Adelaide against anyone outside of the bottom 3.
Yeah, like I said, unfortunately, it's location for this one. If the Crows were at home, I'd be much more confident in tipping the Crows, but I like the D's in this one. I think Max Gawn being the sole ruck, I think it was a good decision. Christian Petrarca playing that forward role. There are very few defenders that are going to be able to shut him down. So I like the D's in this one. Last but not least, Marvel Stadium, this ripping game between the Saints and the Roos. I'm going to tip the Saints in this one. Neither team strikes a ton of confidence, but I just think the Saints are a little less bad. And again, I hate saying that, a little less bad than the Roos are right now. So I'll tip the Saints in this one.
I feel like one of the young Saints is going to have a big game, whether it's Mitch Owens, Anthony Caminiti, or Matthias Filippo. I just hope this is a better game than the last time they played, because the last time they played was probably the least watchable game of the entire season. I think when I think of like unwatchable games, I think back to a game in 2021 that Geelong played against Collingwood in an empty MCG. And I think this topped that. It was 64-34. Um, the number of behinds kicked, it was, let me find the exact numbers because it was just not good
Way
telling.
too many.
It was where is it? Still scrolling here. Was it? God, maybe this game was more recent. Uh, this game must have been more recent than I remember. Yeah, I guess this is a double up. All right, it was round 8. It was 8-16-64 to 4-10-34.
26 behinds kicked.
North did not kick a goal in the first half.
Mm-hmm.
It was, what was the halftime score here? Yeah, the highlight of this game was Matthias Filippo taking a hanger. At halftime, it was 3-9 to 0-7. At quarter time, it was 1-6 to 0-4. So it was bad.
Mm-hmm.
It can't be worse
Unfortunately.
than that.
I really hope not, but unfortunately, with with some of the injuries, the Saints and unfortunately, the Rouge are still a developing side. It'll be fascinating. So, well, that is going to do it for the
Funny.
9 games. Yep.
It would be really funny if Brett Ratton, this is the win he gets. And I really want one with him because I think he's done a good job keeping things from completely disintegrating when things could have been really ugly.
Mm-hmm.
They've had their tight losses, some self-inflicted, some where they just got beat by a good team. So I hope for their sake that they can get one under him, and it would be especially entertaining if it was this one.
It would be very apropos. It'd be fascinating to see how that goes. So, all right. Well, that is going to do it, sir, for our episode. Again, fun to be able to sit down and talk with you. Again, I'll give another opportunity. I know Ben talked about it when we had him on earlier in the year. Just tell us a little bit about Americans watching the footy, how to get a hold of the podcast, and kind of what to expect if for any of my listeners that may want to check you guys out.
Well, we are available on just about every major podcasting platform. We've also been uploading to YouTube this season. We do typically 2 episodes a week, a round preview and a round recap. During bye weeks, we threw in an additional episode where we kind of gave like capsules of each team that was on the bye. Seemed like a good time to do a mid-season progress report. We're definitely going to up the off-season content this year. Last year, we were, maybe 1 episode a month during the off-season. I think you'll get more than that. Definitely going to do more in the way of guest interviews, and we have a couple of fun things that are kind of going to spark some discussion this off season. Couple things like, if we turn into an Instagram graphic could really blow up because like when you rank things, people get pretty heated whether the rankings are good or not.
I know I know. I used to put my power rankings on Instagram, and sometimes you get some interesting comments.
There's this one college football personality that like ranks stuff without any logic to it whatsoever,
Oh
and
boy.
everyone gets like, at least 5-digit views, whether they're good rankings or not, because people get mad over them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
We're good
definitely.
as well, but
So, well, and the other
we're
thing
open
when
to
I
any.
well, when I was talking to Ben, I gave this opportunity to is if you guys ever decide to hop into the AFLW side of things when it comes to it, please reach out and let me know. I'm always there to help. I cover the AFLW through the entire season. I'm actually looking into, I'm going to go reach out to a women's podcast that I know of down in Melbourne to preview this season because the fixture has finally dropped. Unfortunately, only 10 games this season, but again, we have the fixture, so we can start getting everything ready for the women's season, which I'm super looking forward to because I think, yes, we've got 18 teams. I think this should be a little bit more competitive season, and I cannot wait for that to happen. So, again, if you guys ever decide to hop into the women's side, reach out. I'd love to help you guys out.
Certainly will. It would help also, like, that's something that we just didn't have as much exposure to when before we watch AFL. Obviously, we have that now. It is also a busier time of year for me because that's when high school sports are in full swing, but
Mhm.
you're definitely going to try to enjoy more of that this year and especially with some of the personalities. Like there are some fun ones. I'm like I love, when you see the NAB mini legends, mini Nina Morrison.
He's awesome. I love the mini legends. They are fantastic. So, and there's some absolute superstars. You've also got Georgie Pasparkis on the Cats is someone you need to look into. Absolutely scintillating player there. Her older sister Maddie, who's with the Essendon Bombers. I know a new addition to the Sydney Swans, Chloe Malloy, is an absolute X factor. She's fun to watch too. Ellie McKenzie of the Richmond Tigers is one of those big bodied midfielders that she is fun to watch. Anne Hatchard and Ebony Marinoff of the Adelaide Crows are also very much like Clayton Oliver and Christian Petrarca of the men's team. So again, like I said, I will leave that invitation open to you. It's always fun, and I hope you guys have a chance to it. I understand it's not always everybody's cup of tea. I know Craig Wessels, the Yank on the footy, we go back and forth, and with the change of season, unfortunately, he's not able to do it. So, but we go back and forth a little bit with the women as well. So I'm going to end this episode before we get going too much longer. Thanks for listening, ladies and gentlemen. Again, Ethan, thank you again very much for hopping on the podcast, sir.
Really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. Look forward
Oh.
to talking with you in the coming weeks. And, anyone who wants to reach out, we're on Twitter at Americans Footy. That's our handle on most platforms. So come find us there. Love to chat with you.
Fantastic. And that's going to do it for another episode of Donnie's Disposals. And we will be back again with more AFL, AFLW, State League, and interviews coming very soon.
Here's the siren.